So how many solar homeowners are there in the audience here today? 2? I make 3. This is great. We've been doing this 16 years, and we never were able to say that until the last few years. It's exciting to be here and to let you know a little bit about what we're doing across the state. We've got some materials that I brought. I hope you'll take some with you, and I'll show you what those are as we go through this presentation. So Green Energy Ohio is a statewide nonprofit, and we are headquartered here in Columbus. Our office is actually near where my wife Faye and I live in the Worthington Hills area, up on 315, just straight up Olentangy River Road. So I want to talk about solar applications, particularly photovoltaics. I can talk about solar thermal, but I think that's coming later in the agenda. I want to kind of give you a statewide overview and talk about solar electric for green homes, and then our tour, which we have moved from October after 13 years. Last 3 Octobers, we've had terrible weather. I mean, really bad weather. And no one is complaining. So we have 18 sponsors, and I'm working on a magazine right now that will showcase what they're doing. So Icon Solar is in the back of the room. They're based down near Cincinnati, and they will have a page in the magazine. Kevin Eigel with Echo House, who was here earlier. Those are 2 of the installers. And we have a list of all the solar installers in this magazine and the ones in the back. And then I want to just touch on some policy issues. So this is going to be pretty quick hitting. I'll try to leave some time for questions if I can here. So the solar resource is distributed this way. So you can see down in the desert southwest, obviously there's more sun, but there's also a lot of heat. And photovoltaics actually work better when it's cooler. The peak month for our home, and I find other homes in our neighborhood and even other parts of Ohio, is May, because it's still relatively cool in May. When you get to June, which has the most sunlight, solar doesn't work as well. So it's less efficient in a very hot climate like you would see in the deserts. That's why they often use concentrating solar, which is a different technology there. But solar does work, and we always point to Germany. Up until a couple months ago, Germany was the leading solar photovoltaic country. It's now been surpassed by China. And in Germany, they have the average sunlight of Anchorage, Alaska. I've been to Berlin off a cruise ship, and you know, you're at the 60th parallel. So we're at the 40th parallel. So if Germany were in this hemisphere, they'd be up in Canada. And so it's really interesting that the Germans have made, you know, huge progress and are a big player in the solar industry. Here's Ohio, and this is what we call an insolation map, which shows the solar resource. So the greatest sunlight is on the western edge of Ohio. And as you move west to east across Ohio, you hit the snow belt, which you see up there in the northeast corner. And that's the nor'easter effect off the lake. And so there's less sun. We're kind of in the middle here in Columbus. So I wanted to just show you kind of what the sun is all about. And of course, the big thing, if you're going to do solar, you need a south face. And my house that I'm going to show you a lot of pictures of is facing southwest. It's not true south, but you generally would put these on the south side. So there's a whole bunch of data sources. The interesting thing, we've done a tour now for, this will be our 14th year. We have reached 66 of 88 counties with 240 sites, not just solar, but wind, biomass, hydro. The next biggest technology on our tour besides solar photovoltaics is energy efficiency. So we have lead buildings. So that's why we call it the Green Energy Ohio Tour. It's the biggest solar tour in the United States, believe it or not, even though solar is really, the capital is out in California. And then the next biggest solar state, if you're not familiar with this, is New Jersey. And there's a lot of sunlight along the East Coast. So the PUCO, the Public Utility Commission, has a case for everybody who has a solar home or a solar building if they're net metering. That is, if they are offsetting their electric use. And so they have a huge database. And last time I looked, our house was the 1,027th largest solar array in the state. And it's probably much lower now because solar is, we can't even keep track of it, to tell you the truth. So the installers, Icon and Echo House, two that were here today, they know where solar houses are. Now, I talked to AEP last week, and their two operating companies, they have 900 net metered systems in Columbus, Southern, and Ohio Power Territories. So to give you an idea, they can't tell us because of the privacy issues, but and those vary from houses to big solar arrays. So just wanted to give you an overview that there's plenty of information. What my vision is, and I don't know if we'll accomplish this, is to put together a detailed map, particularly to show policymakers, particularly legislators who have voted to kind of hamper what we're doing, and just show them all the jobs and to show them all the distributed generators that are all over the landscape. You know, we can all see a big power plant, but we don't necessarily notice the back of someone's house that may have solar on it. So this is the way our interactive tour site works. You can see tours for the last 7 years right now. So we have some people that have faithfully been on every year, some that are just on 1 year. And then if you click on these Google balloons here, you can actually work up a description of each site, up to 4 photographs, and you know what the facts are about it, the technology, how much it's producing. The other thing that I would love to see someday is to calculate the carbon offset and the water avoided. So if we could create a map, we could show how all these points of light, 1,000 points of light or more, are actually reducing the carbon footprint here in Ohio. And frankly, most of this does not get counted. So the utilities are the primary targets on the Clean Power Plan and reducing carbon, but the reality is more and more of this is going local, and we need to start measuring that. So there's a project for the academics in the room, and we'd love to see that done. And you can take a look at our map. It works pretty well around Ohio. We have guided tours also, where an expert will go from place to place and explain what's happening. Here is the MLSI Map, Mid-Ohio Regional Planning. And this one planning agency that works with all local governments has listed where all the solar arrays are. So they have used these same sources that we use. And it's not as detailed because ours are kind of from the owner viewpoint. And so you get a lot better. The tour is a great thing to go on because people open their houses or open buildings, and you can meet them. So there's the house that Faye and I live in with our dog Geo, a Schnauzer. And this was taken in February. You notice there's not much green there. And this is a 4 kilowatt array. Kevin Eichel, who was here earlier, put this up. These are Solar World panels, and I'm going to just show you what it takes to do a solar home. The 3 solar home owners here have been through this. This is how it started. Do you remember the derecho when we had hurricane force winds here in, I think it was June of 2012, it was 70 mile an hour winds. Well, we have a 140-foot hickory there. We have big oak trees behind our house. This is a 120-foot pignut hickory. And I never realized it, but at the top, it didn't have one trunk. It had 2, and one of them blew down. That's my wife, Faye, way down here. So little Faye in this 40-foot section. So I start here because I could never do solar, because I had a southwest face, but I had this big tree that would shade it. So she said, "You've always been preaching this now. It looks like when I go outside, there's more sun." And she was right. So Kevin came over with a little, it's called a pathfinder, and it shows where the sun is. And that's how we did it, because a tree came down. So if a tree falls in the suburbs, can a solar panel be far behind? That's the story in the magazine that we wrote a couple of years ago. So we've had this for about 2.5 years. I'm going to show you some more pictures of what this involves. So this is Kevin, and the young fellow working with him had been on the Ohio State Solar Decathlon team the year before, and he had a job. And he's up on my roof. I was so excited to see somebody get a job putting it up. So this is the day before they started work. This was December the 3rd. They're putting up a solar, and this is the year of the polar vortex, but it hadn't started then. And so they laid it out. These are called racks, and these they have special fasteners that penetrate the roofs, but there's no leakage, and I very seldom hear about roofs leaking. So if you put this on your roof, which is a cheaper way to do it than putting it on the ground, this is the racking system. And you can see the big oak trees behind, but they're on the north side of the house. This is my wife, Faye, standing next to the solar panels. They're 255 Solar World panels made in Oregon, and they're 3x5, and they weigh about 40 pounds. So a man can take one of these on his shoulder and go up a ladder and put it down. Often they'll use forklifts. This is a very low angle roof. It's 22 degrees, so it's not a very steep roof. That becomes a little more problematic, and they use safety harnesses and that type of thing. So we have 16 of these, and I'll show you some more pictures here. I want to talk about the end-phase inverter, which is a big part of the industry now. And before we put these up, I went to all the neighbors and I said, we're going to put solar on the front of our house. Does this bother you? Because I'm a lawyer, and you know, in theory, if somebody has an eyesore, you can be sued as having a nuisance. There's a legal theory to sue somebody if they put something. The other thing is, if you live in a suburban development like we do, you could have what's called a restrictive covenant or a homeowners association provision. Now, our deed was before solar actually was happening in the late 60s. So, but I went around, and the great thing is all my neighbors said, yeah, Bill, we want to do it too. So that was the good news. So this is what it looks like, and there they are starting to put the first panels on the racking. And then this was taken after they finished it, and the three fellows to the right here are members of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the electrical union. The tall fellow there has got a much bigger solar array in our development, and this group happened to be the electricians. They were training the younger guy, the shorter fellow there, as an apprentice. And so we took down the American flag because everything on this house was made in the United States. The solar panels, the inverters, the whole 9 yards. So, and there's Kevin. I hope some of you met. He's right there. And this is a young man that had been on the decathlon team. And it took him about a day to do this. So it could go up pretty quick. This is used to be considered average. I think it probably still is, 4 kW. This is 16 panels. So to give you an idea. So there's the polar vortex. You all remember the polar vortex. And see this right here, this old man. I just turned 69. So 2.5 years ago, I'm up on a step ladder, and the guy that works with me has had solar for 10 years, and I got this expandable broom, and I'm trying to sweep if you had a high angle roof, which a lot of people have, the panels heat up. They actually give off heat, and the snow melts when it gets above freezing. But I have to say, when it snows, that is the worst thing when it covers the solar panels, because it can't get the light. The other thing is kind of counterintuitive to a lot of people. In the middle of the winter, on the coldest day in February, if it's clear out, this is really pumping. The problem is the sun isn't up long enough. But the solar, is working on light. It's not working on heat. So it's direct conversion of sunlight using the photovoltaic effect. This was taken later, and I just wanted to put this picture in to show you the shading. So behind each panel, the big innovation in recent years, we used to have an inverter. When we started 16 years ago, all these would be strung together. There would be an inverter which has to take the direct current coming off the solar panel and convert it to alternating current so we can use it in our homes. And now what they've done is they have a little micro inverter behind each panel. So had this been 10 or 15 years ago, if one panel was shaded, and you can see the tree, what's left of the tree up there shading. 10 years ago, it would have hit that one panel, it would have broken the string, and everything would have gone down. Now they've developed a microinverter behind each panel. So that panel, or part of that panel, may go down, but all the rest are working, which is a lot more efficiency. And this is a billions and billion-dollar business, and there are several versions of this in the market. So frankly, with some shading, and I had him build it bigger because solar is so cheap now. We tell people if you looked at solar 5 years ago, you need to relook at it because you know, the houses that have come in the last 2.5 years that I know Kevin is doing are less cost. So the price is one of the few things where price is continuing to come down. And to give you a hard example, I don't know if you've, there's a big story I just put up on our Facebook from Business First. You may have read that AEP wants to do 800 megawatts of solar and wind. Why? Because the projection of EIA, the government agency, which is very conservative, this year on the utility grid across the entire United States, the biggest addition is going to be utility scale solar. So if I build a big field of solar, I can put it up at less than half the cost is on this house. And that is more economic than building a coal plant, than building a gas plant, or building a nuclear plant. So they're projecting solar, the biggest addition to the grid, natural gas, which you hear a lot about here in Ohio with fracking, number 2. And number 3 is wind power. We've actually the turning point has actually happened. And the utilities are beginning to recognize that. So when people say, well, solar is too expensive and is out in the future, that's not true. And we have some people in the legislature continue to propagate that idea. But the reality is that the costs are dropping. This was our first solar tour in October. There is the meter. I wanted to show the picture of the meter here, which is right here. So we have a revenue meter. The actual electric meter is on, most electric meters are away from the sun on the north side of a house. If you think about where the electric meter is on your house, it's away from the sunny side. And this is a long ranch house, so it's like 75 feet. So we got a variance or an exception from AEP. And so this comes up through the roof, all these microinverters tie together. It goes down into our electric box, which is right below where everybody's standing. And then I had a TV crew out at my house a couple of weeks ago, or a week ago, and they always love this. You can actually see the solar meter turning, and so you can see solar power going directly into the box, which is offsetting the grid power. And now, this is still a small array. It only powers about 1/3 of our house. So we never net meter totally into the grid. We're never negative. But there are houses in our neighborhood, and I'll talk about that in a second, that do that. There's the meter. Just turned over 8 megawatt hours, so we get 1 solar renewable energy credit, SREC, for every megawatt hours. The problem is I get about $19 for 1 SREC. And after our legislature stopped the renewable standard, it crashed the SREC market and stopped investment because a lot of big solar arrays, some of them were built assuming a $300 for 1 SREC. And so that becomes important. That's why it's called a revenue grade meter, because we can sell power for, you know, a small amount into the grid that's considered solar. And you also have RECs for wind and other renewable energy. So this is what our load curve looks like. And again, these highest peaks are in May. And this is the first 2.5 years, or roughly a little two years or so. And you can see these are the winter periods. And you can see it gets really sunny and the thing jumps up if it's a clear day. We also had some power outages in our neighborhood. And, but when Kevin gave us a prediction, he was like right on the money. You can pretty much, and this is good for utilities, you pretty much can tell what you're going to get for solar output. And like today, if it's a clear, or I shouldn't say, if it's a cloudy, bright overcast, it may produce half as much as a full sun day. And so you learn about, you know, you learn a lot about your relationship to the sun. Let's put it that way. And that's what the curve looks like. So this is what's on our tour site from last year. I've got to update this. It was $3.85 per watt. You know, when we started, it was $10 a watt 15 years ago. Solar panels have gone down 73% in the last 10 years, and they continue to go down. The estimated savings, you can see $500 off the electric bill, and this talks about the SRECs. So this is not without an upfront cost, but the cost keeps going down. We had a 30% tax credit. Installed, this cost $16,000. Our cost after 30% tax credit was $11,000. The tax credits have been extended, fortunately, and that's keeping a lot of our business alive because you can still get a 30% tax credit. And lessons learned. We live in an oak forest. We have squirrels. We hear them drop on our roof. Fortunately, Kevin said, "You have squirrels." So we put up a squirrel guard, which is just a little, if you look closely at the pictures, a little wire mesh to keep the squirrels. Unfortunately, one of our neighbors behind us did not do that. He had one little tree. He didn't have the giant oak trees we got. One little tree, and the squirrel went up that one little tree, got underneath, chewed the wires, and we started Googling, and do you know that there's peanut oil used in the insulation around wires? That's why squirrels can shut down electric grids. I didn't know any of this. So one lesson we learned, if you live in an oak forest, you got to keep those critters away from your solar arrays. They can shut the whole thing down. So another thing that we learned is about the snow. And so it's not a perfect technology, but it's very clean. And we've been able, I just looked at it on my phone, we've been able to save almost 6 tons of carbon. We have avoided the use of 6 tons of carbon. And that's just a small solar array. So there's the better picture. That was taken in August when there's something green. And there we are with our dog Geo. And there's the solar arrays. I really like them because they look like a black mirror. And they come in, you know, different types. These are 255s. I'll talk a little bit about Ohio Sun. I don't know how much time I've got. I don't want to take too much time here. But there are people in the state now putting up array or panels that have 325 watts on one panel. These are 255s. The guy that works with me had 170s from 10 years ago. They're a little bit bigger panels. So the technology keeps getting better. They keep packing more power onto these panels. And I'm not sure where it ends because they keep making better photovoltaic systems. So this is Jack Hedge, who's an architect. Some of you may know. He just retired from Design Group. And this is Jack's Volt right here in blue. There he is on his roof. We have 6 solar homes in Worthington Hills done by 6 different installers. We did a tour of them. Jack actually re-insulated his house and he had a 4 kW system like we did, and he was making too much power. And the AEP said, you cannot be a net generator into the grid. So he bought an electric car. And the electric car will go 45 miles on a solar charge. So he could drive it to downtown and Columbus back, even if he doesn't even charge it downtown. Because it does have a gas engine, but a volt will go 45 miles. So he has made a calculation, which was at the American Solar Energy Society, one of the papers presented about how his car is now helping him pay back his solar arrays because he's, you know, it's equivalent, it depends on what the price of gas is, but gas is very volatile, as we all know, gasoline. So we have the fellow who had the squirrel, he had a Volt too. So we have 2 electric cars. So we're going to see more and more solar powering cars. So this is Jerry Lambert and his wife who live in Lake County in the snow belt. Jerry got so inspired by the story of our house. He said, Bill, I want to do this. I said, Jerry, if you've got the land, which he does, I said, put it on the ground. So when Jerry goes out, his expandable broom, he's standing on the ground. He can take the snow off in the snow belt. And they get a lot of snow in the snow belt. So he is very happy with this. And I just wanted to show you pictures. This could cost more because you have to use a support structure on the ground. And he got 3 bids from installers. He went with the one I think was the lowest bid. He's very happy with the work. And this is the structure that they use. So it doesn't have to be on a roof. And in many ways, if you position it on the ground, you can put it true south and get the optimal effect. And so this is Bold Alternatives, Cleveland installer. Let's put that up. This is Martin Langeas, who is a retired professor from Ohio State here. His house just north of Riverside Hospital, the first street after the hospital there. And it's almost twice as big as the one on our roof. And he has a car, which isn't shown here, but it shows how much he has avoided. 16,000 pounds of CO2 emissions, and the equivalent of taking cars off the road. And also you can measure how much water, because you don't think about a power plant has to be cooled by water, a coal plant, a nuclear plant, a gas plant. And so by putting up solar or wind, we're actually saving water, which, you know, if we have a drought, their power plants will have to shut down if the river or lake levels go down. So, but anyway, I wanted to show you what a carbon offset, and we'd love to do this with every site in Ohio. We need to know the production numbers to do that. So here's Barry Adler, the fellow I was talking about. Some of you may have been out to his place in Plain City. It's just off Route 33, just on the other side of Dublin. And it's a greenhouse, has solar electric, solar thermal, and a small wind turbine. And he's off-grid. He has batteries. I just want to say, if you go to our Facebook right now, I just put up at 1 o'clock a story about the Tesla battery. If you haven't heard of Elon Musk's battery, he's building a big battery factory. And while I was pulling in today, I had a fellow with fuel cells that said, well, fuel cells are better than batteries. So there are all these other technologies as you get into net zero homes that can come into play in the future. So we had a policy summit here in this room. We had 140 people and 30 speakers and covered a dozen issues. And just to give you a couple ideas, if you can't put solar on your house, one option is called community solar. And let me show you that right here. This was a picture from the Wall Street Journal, and this woman is signing her name on solar panels. So the idea is pretty simple. You build a big giant solar field at half the cost of putting it on your roof, and people own panels. And if the utility cooperates, they get the power and it offsets directly on their bill. It's called virtual net metering. They're doing it in Michigan, huge thing up in Minnesota. These are states north of us, Colorado. We think the munis are going to be the first. Our speaker from Minster, Ohio is here. It's a municipal utility. He has a clearance to go ahead and try community solar there. So another way to get power to the people, because it's estimated half to 2/3 of a community, particularly if it's a treed community, can't do solar. There's just too much shade. And I understand that because I was one of those people till the tree fell over. So that's one option. And let me go back here a second. I don't know if any of you saw me on Channel 10 last week. I don't do this that often anymore. But the utility CEO of AEP said they're going to start charging solar homeowners extra charges. On your bill every month is a customer charge that you pay, a minimum charge. And this is a big issue in all but 4 states. It's been fought out in California. California sided with the net metered customers. Nevada did not. And so what would happen is if people are penalized for having solar, and this is going to force more and more people to look at battery systems, which may happen anyway. And so what I was talking about here was that our house has no shading in the summer, and we're actually helping AEP because they don't have to go into the power market and buy expensive power because we're generating our own. It gets up to 24 kWh a day is the highest we generate. And you can see it peak on that. So this is one of the fights that's happening. There's a whole bunch of them. But the article today is saying if net metering is done away with, then you're going to see more and more people going to batteries if they can bring the price of batteries down. When I looked at a conventional battery, about the time we put this up, we had a battery company there. They wanted as much for the batteries as for the solar array, which like doubled the cost. But if Elon Musk can create this battery, as he says he can, he's trying to lower the cost 30% for lithium batteries, then you begin to break through those barriers. And I just said, last thing I said in the interview was, how many of us remember the wireline telephone? When I started as consumer counsel 40 years ago, I was only 29 when I was appointed to this job. That makes me feel really old. We had all wireline telephones. You know, they were little black telephones, and now you think about it, we all have cell phones. So we have all this stranded investment of the Bell system, all these wires, and you know, many of us are making calls on a cable line now. Or you can also communicate, you know, with cell phones and various technologies. So the last bottleneck monopoly is what it's called in antitrust law, is the wire to the home. So if I can use my solar array to power my car, I can charge a battery, I become more and more, this is the whole idea of the net zero energy home. So anyway, remains to be seen what will happen here. I'd rather work with AEP. I don't know if you saw it's in Business First, but you know, they're making a huge commitment to solar and wind. We see this all over the country because I just explained earlier, the cost, it's about economics. It's not because they want to be green, it's because it's a great time that this is actually starting to happen, and I think our federal government deserves a lot of credit for pushing this. So, just to give you an idea, we have 120 megawatts of solar in the ground in Ohio. 20 megawatts are small systems, like a house, but 100 megawatts are big systems. And here they are, right here. The biggest is up at Upper Sandusky. I did an interview with the science editor of the BBC News. I'm waiting to see it. 2 weeks ago, we were sitting there in the biggest solar field. It actually feeds into AEP. And some of these are on roofs, and there's a map up here, shows where they are. I don't know how many of you know that Gahanna schools have 2 megawatts, never been in the Columbus Dispatch once. I don't know how many of you know West Jefferson has a megawatt at its school, never been in the Columbus Dispatch once. I mean, it's amazing. So we also have a lot of factories. We have 2 GM plants that have solar, and it just goes on, and it just keeps getting better. And we're going to have a big solar conference at the end of August in Bowling Green. The municipal utilities are going to build the largest solar array in the state, 20 megawatts. And we have solar companies. If you lived in Toledo, or if you're familiar with Toledo, that's where the big first solar plant is. There's a whole supply chain. We're the number 2 or 3 third state in the country in making solar panels. And we're number 1 in making parts that go into wind turbines. And yet we have policymakers down the street in the State House trying to hamper us, and all that's happening is our installers are having to go out of state to stay alive, and you know, we're the only state that's really rolled it back because it doesn't make sense. There's too many jobs. So I'm very optimistic that the technology can't be stopped, and you can see AEP starting to talk about it. I think they'll break from the other utilities. So, and here's how it breaks out. I don't know if you can read all that, but there's the regions of Ohio. So here in Columbus, we have 15 systems over 100 kW, or about 10 megawatts, big systems, and I haven't counted. I can go on and on about where all these are at. Like over in London, there's a Staples that's got a giant array on its roof. A lot of these are private corporations. We have 14 Walmarts with big solar. Costco up at Polaris, nobody knows this, and Costco doesn't want to advertise it, but they have a big solar array at that Costco on the roof. It's their only one in the Midwest. So we have companies putting it on, again, because it's saving them money. A lot of times they'll talk about how green they are, but it's because they're saving money. So here was the community solar. This is how it works in various versions. Have any of you heard about Ohio Sun? Do you know what that is? Well, let me just explain. I was talking to Matt about it at ICON. In Delaware, the day before we met here at our policy conference, 100 people came together, and it's a bulk buying club. And it's going to come into Franklin County. It probably is going to come in through Worthington, is what I'm being told. So 100 people came together. A week later, they had 30 homes of that 100 that they looked at with satellite maps. And they said, we think these you can do solar on. And a week after that, or 2 weeks, they put out a bid. And I don't know how many installers bid on it. And it's not the bid is not, we don't know who won the bid, but they're going to save 20%. This is in addition to the 30% tax credit, because the winning installer comes in and does 30 homes at once. And it's just simply bulk buying. We're going to run a story about Oberlin. Third Son won that bid. And so we're going to have whole communities, which is really exciting for us, that will be getting solar at the lowest cost we can provide it by doing bulk buying, starting to get some of the economies that you can get with these big systems that are called community solar, or what the big guys do. So that's an exciting development that is happening. So this is Minster. This is the 4th largest solar array in the state. It also has a battery. This is a 4.4 megawatt. It charges a 7 megawatt battery, and they want to expand this and do community solar. I don't know how many, anybody here ever been to Minster, Ohio? Yeah, they have an Oktoberfest that's 80,000 people, if you can imagine Ohio Stadium in this little village of 3,000 people. Big factories there. It's all the Dannon yogurt East Mississippi made there. And so anyway, this has a big battery system. And so because of what the legislature did, the batteries start to make sense, more and more sense. And so I think you can kind of see the push here. The more the utilities try to come in, put charges on, technology cannot be stopped. We saw this in telephones and telecom communications. So, the homeowners of the future are going to have a lot of options. And so this is all about big solar there. And that's all I have. Thank you.